This video assumes that you have spent time prior creating a question bank in Moodle. And the next step is really to access that question bank to build a quiz that you'll post on your page. So I'm on the health science page right now, and we're going to take a closer look at how it is that one set up a chemical use unit test. So I'm down here, and in order to set it up originally, the teacher of the page would have gone under add an activity to quiz. I'm not going to do that right now because it's in existence, and you can see all the options after the fact by clicking on the update button. So when somebody does add a quiz, this is what they see originally. So you name the test, and then there's an introduction field. Jane Kleiman didn't actually fill that out, but had she done that, that would have been text. That would have been the first thing that the students would see when they click on the link to the quiz. Now, in general, I would advise that you would disable the quiz open date and close date, because although that might be helpful in terms of limiting the availability of the quiz for students, another way of doing that is to click on the hide icon or tool, which looks like an eyeball on the front page of, or the Moodle page, the home page. And I prefer that because otherwise I wonder if I will forget my open and close date and just assume the next year that it is showing for the students, and then realize later when they're not able to get in that there was a close date that was in the past. The other thing is I want to let you know that I'm not going to actually discuss each and every field in the setup here, because you can always click on the this little icon with the question mark and you can read more about that option. But a lot of these things I don't use very often, and I don't think you will either. The display section is how many questions you want on any given page delivered to the students at one time. If it's a long quiz, I absolutely recommend that you choose 5 questions per page or 10, so that the entire quiz isn't loaded on one open web page. The other advantage to that is that if you have 5 questions per page, the students get to save their answers after 5 questions before moving on to the next the next set of questions. And that's always nice. If there's an interruption in the internet connection, then it ensures that the current progress up to that point has been saved. You can also shuffle questions so that not everybody has the same question number 1, 2, and 3. So if you're in a computer lab, that's kind of nice, because then you don't necessarily have 2 people that are following each other question by question. And you can also shuffle the answers within the questions. Got to be a little bit careful about that in case you have something like you have one question that, or 3 questions that go together, and the first one says, in the next 3 questions, look at this graph. Well, if things are out of order, that could kind of mess things up. You can allow students to make more than one attempt on a quiz. It is very possible that you'd want to use this module as a teaching tool rather than an assessment tool. So for students to get immediate feedback and then try the quiz again to improve their score. This section you would use for that type of an exercise. Then if you do use it as a teaching tool, allowing students to take the quiz more than once, you're going to want to choose a grading method. These are the different options where students would be presented with what their score is based on their duplicate attempts. Lastly, you may or may not remember that when you set up your questions, you had the ability to give general feedback for any given question, or you had the ability to give feedback for each answer within a question. So all of these things can be presented to the students, and you can very fine-tune the delivery of this information for a quiz. So when do you want them to see the correct answers? Do you want that to be right after they've made their attempt, or do you want it to be later on. Actually, this is funny because I don't really know when later on is. Um, but you can kind of tease that out and do some experimenting. In fact, we can click on this button and we can find out what later on means if Moodle gives that great information. So I say later, while the quiz is still open, means after this and before the quiz close date. Not really sure what that means. So anyway, the other thing is that there's something called overall feedback. That is feedback that you are going to post that relates to not an individual question, but the quiz as a whole. And that's at the bottom of this page, and you'll see it momentarily. You have the ability to open up the quiz in a secure window that doesn't have a location bar or a search bar, but quite honestly, your students are much savvier than that, and that's not going to keep them from referencing necessarily another browser to look up information on the internet. So just be aware of that. If you would like them to poke in a password before taking the quiz, that is one way to secure it. So some people are limited to seeing the quiz and other people are not. You could also, this is uncommon, but you could put in the network addresses for a computer lab if you wanted to make sure that that test could not be taken anywhere other than the computer lab where you bring the students. I will skip the module settings, never use them. And then if you want to do a little pat on the back type of thing, you could give feedback based on the overall percentage of student scores on a quiz. Or if you have something like 5% and below, you could say something like better study harder next time. So that is how the general, or excuse me, the overall feedback for the quiz works. Click on Save and Display. And then the next thing you as the teacher will be presented with is the tools to build the quiz. The right-hand side is your question bank, and the left-hand side are the questions on your test. So when you first come to this, there will be nothing on the left-hand side, and your job is to choose a category in your question bank. So in this case, I would choose the chemical category, which has 60 questions in it. And then you can click on these little triangle or these little brackets to add any question one by one to the quiz, which is on the left. If you want to add more than one question at a time just to speed up the process, you can put check marks in several spots here. Go down to the bottom and click on the Add to Quiz option, and then they'll all go over on the left-hand side in your quiz at once. On the left-hand side, you have the ability to reshuffle or reorder your quiz questions with the up and the down arrows, but remember, if in your original setup you chose to shuffle your questions, it doesn't really, there's no point in doing that right now. You can also reassign the value for any given question. So by default, the value is going to be what you designated when you created that quiz question in the bank. And if you want to override that value, you can change the number from 1 or from whatever it is to something else. Your other options in here are to preview the question. So if the question name itself doesn't remind you exactly what that question is, you can click on the magnifying glass to see the entire question, such as this. That's very helpful when you're setting up the quiz question. I'm going to close the preview. You can also edit or update the question, which gets you right back into the bank if you need to. Or if you've changed your mind and you want to remove the question, you can click on these little right brackets. At the very bottom, when you first come into this section, the maximum grade is probably not going to be a reflection of the total points. So make sure that you change that so that it is at least as large as your total points or greater. Does that make sense? I don't know. Okay. Then you click Save Changes. And really that's all you need to do. You can click Go, or you can go back up to the top and click on your breadcrumbs to get back to your home page. And then you have a quiz posted ready to go for your students in Moodle.